On the minuses, you hear a bit, particularly in Southeast Asia, less in Northeast Asia, a sense that Australians are complacent and on occasion boastful. That's a sense I've got sitting in some of these capitals over many years. It's something about the way we present. It is, after all, a very good country, and that sense of, we've got it pretty good, we know how to do it, we can tell you how to do it, comes through. Not particularly good on technology. This is another perspective that comes through. Australians are good at digging stuff up, growing stuff, running hotels, good country to visit, but not good on technology. And a country without a profound culture. And this doesn't take sufficient account, perhaps, of the history of the Aboriginal people. It doesn't take sufficient account of what has in fact been done also in the last 100 years. It doesn't take into account the very highly qualified world of museums, and which in Australia we are actually very good at. But nonetheless, I think it's a perception. And the final comment which comes through time and time again is the issue of race. Now, and this has got a long history. It goes back to the White Australia policy. It takes into account the Hanson period. It takes into account the treatment of the Aboriginal people, and it also takes into account such issues, particularly in the subcontinent, of the Hanif affair and the Students' affair. Now, it can be argued, the degree to which race played a part in those issues, but whatever the reality may be, the perception is, I think, in a lot of Asia that there were racial aspects to both those big issues. And the Hanif affair played very, very loud in India, and the students' issue has played even louder. Now, it may well be that the reason that these issues played so loud and were so vivid in India was because of Indian television, the 24-hour news channels and so on. But, be that as it may, the fact is it had a huge impact. And it came back to this suspicion about our credentials on race. Despite multiculturalism, despite all the changes that have taken place in Australia over the last 30 or 40 years, that remains an issue for us. Okay, so I went from there and I thought, well, how much can I back this up? And so I really got to work a little bit on the polls. Now, I don't claim to have seen all the polls here, but I had a look at, and you can do most of this on the web, at the Anholt GFK Roper polls, which essentially come out of Europe, based really in London, but now a lot of polling in Europe, from Europe into Asia. Another one, Reputation Institute, based in New York. Again, you can get a lot of material on the web on this. Our own Lowy polling of Australian attitudes outside the country, and also some Japanese Foreign Ministry polling of Japanese attitudes to other countries. I think there is more available, but and I myself intend to dig, but that I think was pretty representative. Now, without going into all the details of these polls, several things came through to me. First of all, Australia came out really very high on general reputation. Now, reputation is a hard thing to measure, but the way these pollsters tend to measure it is divide each country that is being polled, is being assessed, into somewhere between 6 and 9 sectors. That would include governance, include exports, place to invest, tourism, the type of people in the country, whether people feel a sense of solidarity with the people of the country, and so on. And then they ask people in another 20, 25 countries to assess each of those countries. Maybe 35 in one poll, 50 in another poll, assessing all those countries according to these various criteria, then they make an average score from the scores of the various criteria, the various sectors, if you like. Now, this isn't a perfect system of doing it, but it's quite interesting. It gives you some guidance. Now, several things came through. One, Australia comes out pretty high on overall polling. It came third in one poll, as you know, by reputation as a country, taking into account all these issues. It came ninth in another poll. Again, not quite so high, but still pretty high, and rating reasonably high in most sectors. So overall, I think we can be probably pleased with that overall result. Second thing, and this gave me a little bit of pause to worry, one of the things these pollsters do is they include in the overall score where a country puts itself. Now, a number of countries in overall reputation put themselves first. That's how the working comes out. People feel good about their countries, and maybe if they don't necessarily feel good, they feel a need to be patriotic. But what is interesting here is that more Australians put themselves first than the people polled in other countries put their countries first. So this, of course, can reflect that Australians feel very good about themselves, and that's a good thing. What is a little bit worrying is it can also reflect complacency. And my instinct tells me there is a bit of complacency in this. Let's not mess about. I'm pretty sure that's right. So that's the second point. Now, the third thing, looking into these polls a little bit more profoundly, is the good scores that Australia got tended to be from countries a bit like us in terms of ethnic composition and history. We got very good scores, particularly from the developed English-speaking countries. Very high scores from Canada, very high scores from the US, very high scores from the British. Pretty high scores from other countries like the Scandinavians, Germans, because good place to go, as they saw it, good governance, etc. Where we came in much less well was in the scores from Asian countries and developing countries. Now, when I say much less well, it was a little bit of concern because the scores tended to have Asian countries, not necessarily putting other Asian developing countries very high at all, not that, but that they tended to see other developed countries higher than Australia. And also, what was rather worrying was we got sort of medium level, respectable sorts of scores from polls out of China and from polls out of Japan. We didn't do nearly as well as we might think we would do out of Japan, interestingly enough. But it was okay. Where we got really rather worrying scores, not out of the Philippines, where it was actually quite positive, but very worrying scores out of Indonesia in particular and out of India. Now, most recent polling out of India is really serious because, particularly because of the student issue, we are seen as a country in a very, very bad light by India. And it is not only in terms of their judgments on the Australian people and the governance in Australia, it has overflown to other areas of perceptions in India of Australia. Perceptions in Indonesia of Australia are not good, but they're much, much worse in India of Australia. Okay. And that is a bit of concern because, after all, China, India and Indonesia are the three biggest countries of this emerging area, which has always been in our backyard, but which is now becoming increasingly important in global, not just regional terms. Now, you can argue, of course, that the reasons we get those rather poor scores, as opposed to the better scores that countries in Europe might get, is that because we engage, this is our region, we have more issues with these countries, hence there is more room for them to view us with disfavour. You can argue that. Equally, however, some of this polling shows that slightly adverse polling tends to be caused by lack of knowledge of a country. So we can't have it both ways. It seems to me we have a problem. I don't know how much of a problem yet. We need to work on it, but we have a problem. Okay.